Thank you to GameWare Create for being a channel partner. Looking for a Kickstarter game you missed or 3D printed minis? GameWare Create has a huge selection available, all at a fair price. Use the link in the description below to check out all that GameWare Create has to offer. What's up, Rockstars? Welcome to a fun video with BoardGameCo. This is Alex with me here, and we're going to be talking about just how we review board games. We'll have different takes on things. We'll disagree in some parts. I'm sure we'll agree in other parts. It should be pretty interesting, so I hope you like it.
Thanks so much for having me. This is a blast. I've been watching stuff for a long time. I'm looking forward to this video. Honestly, about 4 minutes ago, before I knew the full in-depth of where this video would go, I was intrigued by the video, and now I'm much more interested because I think this will be great for both our audiences to get an idea of insight into the process, how we do different things. I think, like you said already, there will be some degree of agreement, disagreement, and then some degree of just not necessarily either. Just we might just do things differently, and that's okay.
Yeah, totally, 100%. Totally. And actually, that's probably, I guess, how we should start out, is just kind of a basic, we'll both have kind of a platform to say, okay, here's just my take on reviews. Here's how I do it. And I guess what I'm really talking about here is like process. So just like, how do you go about doing a review?
Sure. So as a just general overview before I get into that, well, not overview, I don't know what I'm talking about, forget that. So it's something that's always evolving. And what I mean by always evolving, there's a specific step I've actually added recently because I have found that it is a factor. But the general process, and I'll tell you what that step was as well, my general process is obviously an important part is playing the game. But actually even before that is learning the rules for a game. Learning the rules for a game is going to be the first and most important step. And this is an area where it does go two ways depending on whether I've played online with the developer first or not. Sometimes there have been times where I've played online with the developer and then I get the rules from them, and then I sit down myself and I have to know it after that because I still have to walk myself through it without someone there holding my hand. And then I have to, then I have to actually reread the rule book from the initial play. If I'm not playing online, then I usually go through the rule book once or twice myself. Usually it's at least twice. I find that a first read of the rulebook is literally just the process of assembling the puzzle. And that second rulebook read, you now actually know what everything looks like, and everything makes a lot more sense. It's usually an essential part to getting a game moving, unless it's a simpler game, in which case sometimes one read through is enough. From there, we get the game set up and we try to play it with whoever I almost always try for ideal player count, by the way. One thing I do not do, or I do not try to do, is I do not try to play a game with all different player counts. What I do is, depending on whether it's a game, if it's already released game, I usually check BGG to see what player count the game is best with. And if it's a prototype, I check with the publisher to say, what player count do you think the game is best with, or what range? And the reason for that is twofold. One is I don't want my first play to be subpar. I want my play to be ideal. And two is I'm not going to give a game 15 different plays before reviewing it, and so I want those plays to be as ideal as possible. Once I get that information, I usually try to play it with that group, whether it's solo, 2-player, 3-player, 4-player, whoever it might be. So let's take a standard 3-player game. I'll go ahead and play it together with my group. And from here is an important part that is actually, there's a ton of information to go through here, but an important part is, if I have a particularly negative experience with a group, I almost always try to shift it up for my second play, meaning I shift the group. And that's because I find groupthink is an important part of your experience. And so if I play a game and have a bad experience, especially if the other people had a bad experience, I usually try to pivot who I play with for the second time to see if I got pulled in by that. Now, sadly, I'm not as good with that if I had a good play. If I had a very good play and it's biased by the other players, I don't seek to find other players to have a negative play for it, sure, which is an important, relevant, context of what I'm looking for and not. I find people can bring a game down more than they can bring it up, but both are going to be factors. From there, it usually comes down to how many more plays I need, and this is where it's going to, again, depend on the game. If I'm playing a game like Wild Ascent, Chronicles of Drunagar, if I'm playing any campaign-based game, I usually try to get up until a point where I feel like I'm not getting new things thrown at me, and that will vary. Recently, I've been going through Assassin's Creed, and that's a game that I've been taking my time with because every 2 missions, something new comes out, and it's like, well, okay, great. Well, let me keep going because I want to see the new stuff. Once I get a feeling that the pace has slowed, that the new things are no longer developing, that's when we'll try to get the video out. And a big part of this is, in a perfect ideal world, I'd review a game 4 months after playing it, but there's always the time, well, not always, sometimes there are timelines, sometimes there's just the benefit as a content creator to being there first. So it always is a balance of trying to be as comprehensive as possible while, getting the video out when it's most relevant or helpful. So yeah, so I'll go ahead and campaign games, I'll give it as much plays as I think the information is no longer developing. Usually on the low end, I would say it's about 5 plays. On the higher end, that could be 10 plays depending on the game. If it's not a campaign game, then it's usually a lower amount, usually a lower threshold. Games I don't like often have 2 or 3 plays. I don't like reviewing a game after only 1 play, but I also don't like playing games that I don't like. So it's balanced there. Games I do like will usually be close to 3 to 5 plays, sometimes more depending on how often I was able to get it in, and also depending on the game time. A short 5-minute game, I'll play 7 times. A 3.5 hour long game, I'll play 4 or 5 times. I think, and then process. So then from there, once I'm done with the play part of everything, my usual process from there is I have a format I go with, which is what I liked, didn't like, and what I can see others not liking. And those are just bullet notes that I literally just try to fill it out. I start with what I liked, which is usually pretty easy. What about this experience was actually enjoyable for me? Although if I don't like the game, it sounds like it can be a little harder, but there always is something. I may not like a game, but I'll appreciate the fact that there's different pathways to victory. That's something that's cool, even if the game was dry as anything. So I'll go through and try to specifically find bullet points. I look for them intentionally. And same thing with what I don't like. I could love a game, and I will intentionally look for all the things that in any way grated on me. The rulebook was a chore to get through. I didn't like the fact that, these cards were the color contrast made it hard to see. I'll look for things if I need to. And then what I can see others not liking is usually a hybrid of taking from other players at the table who had their own complaints, as well as just trying to think outside the box. Like, oh, I didn't like the fact that, or let's say it's a game that might be only good at 2 players. I might mention this game, I thought it was best at 2 players, which for me is great. I'm happy to play this 2 players. But understand that even though the box says 2 to 4, it's really going to be a slog at 4. So I'll try to throw that in. And then from there, it's just a question of filming and posting the video.
Nice, good. And I'm glad you didn't go into editing. I would have had to stop you. I'm like, nah, nobody wants to hear that. That's the most boring part of the whole role that we play, I think. So, totally. That's cool. We actually share quite a bit in common, and that's cool. One of the things I don't think we do enough as a industry on this side of things, on the content creator side of things, is discuss review methods and tactics and how, okay, how do you get this? How do you do that? I think we could benefit a lot from actually talking to each other more in that respect. So part of the reason why this was an option for us to chat with, and part of the reason I was excited for this chat too. So very interesting to hear how you do it. I'll go and say how I do it, and then we'll move on from there. I was going to say I won't be as long, but we will see.
Yeah, I didn't think it would be that long. There's a lot to cover.
There's a lot to do, right?
Yeah.
Like it's an involved process. Okay, so I have some bullet notes here that I always cheat on. I sometimes follow them. So one thing I make it a big point to do. I guess I'll start with picking a review. One of the things I think is hard to handle as a creator is you tend to like the games you play because you tend to play the games you like. And so I get contacted all the time by people saying, hey, play my game. We'd love you to do a review. And I was like, that looks like the most boring thing. You're farming sheep. I'm out. Like, it's not, or sometimes it honestly just looks kind of bad. Like, you can tell the art's not all there, and, they're disorganized. There's spelling mistakes in their email to you. And like, I don't know if I want to put myself through that kind of prototype, especially if it's an early copy of something. Prototypes come in all shapes and forms and sizes, and some are really put together for you, and some, there's a lot of work involved just to get it to the table. And so there's a natural filtration, unless you're running a channel where you're just trying to review everything. And ideally then you have multiple reviewers that like different things, because you still kind of want to be the target audience for that game. There's no benefit for me to review a game that isn't meant for me, right? Just because obviously I'm not even the sale they're trying to get, and what I represent isn't either. And so there's a natural filtration there to games that I like to begin with. But once I finally get it in, one of the first things I do is I never take notes on the first time I play a game, but I will take notes during gameplay afterwards. So I want that experience to be as close as possible to how, if I just got this game, then this is how I do it. And nobody's looking at a game being like, to me, that's the movie critics. You know how like movie critics will have like a 65 and audience score will have a 91. That's because if you're critical and you're going in and you have a notebook during a movie, you're going to tear apart a movie. And if you're just going there with your buddies, you already had some drinks, you're going to get some more, and you're just trying to have a good time and, and enjoy a date or whatever, you're not going to be taking notes in the back somewhere, right? It's a different experience. The consumer experience is something I always try to keep. And so I take no notes on the first play session always. And then it's only after the second one that I might actually note something if something happens, or even just have a discussion afterwards saying, with a, kind of a retrospective or a post-mortem where this around the table, hey, what'd you think? Did you like that? Did you not? Because like you said, other people have different perspectives as well. And that's really nice to get theirs too, because they might pick up on something like, you know what, it's hard to pinpoint the thing that might bother you or why you like something. Like, why did that work where you've seen that done before in others and it didn't? Oh, it's because it did it this way or it did it that way. Sometimes they have some good info. Even my kids, actually, they tend to think very differently than me. And so I get a lot of good points from them. One of the things I also do is I try to ensure I have enough pros and cons. So you do a kind of a 3-section review, and I just tend to list pros and cons and then list them all at the end. And I think it's important because if I really like a game, I might have 2 improvements, not even like negatives. And keeping up that kind of critical eye on things, putting that part into my review, I do try to actually view it and see like, okay, how could things improve? How could things be better? Oh, it could have done this, or, maybe it lasted a little too long, or, its setup actually took a long time. I don't care because it's a great game, but, you can still say, hey, setup takes a long time, because somebody might be really, like, that might be a pet peeve of theirs. That might be the thing that breaks the game, is a long setup time, whereas I might be more forgiving of that. And so I always try to do that. But the flip side as well, if I'm quite negative on a game, I'll really try and search for the positives, because it's hard to, if you're just grumpy because you had a rough play session and then you're like, that game's crap, and you're like, well, but you know what, like the game, like, play is actually really smooth and the combat's swift. I didn't like the randomness of it, but the combat is really fast paced, and that's nice. I like that. Other people might like that, and I can note that. So I always try to, make sure that there's a fair amount of balance. That doesn't mean that I'm like counting the bullet points or anything like that, or, I gotta get 5. But it's just my process of trying to, view the other side of how I feel and make sure that I'm getting all those notes. Another thing is I avoid the meta that doesn't affect the game. And so, for instance, there might be a company that I've disliked or that I've talked bad about, but if they made a good product, I'm not going to say, first of all, people might disagree. Second of all, it doesn't change the thing they make, right? And the thing that you're buying, and that's that. But if a company has, maybe they haven't delivered the last 5, and this is just an example, by the way, and the one that they did, everything was flimsy and really bad, then when I'm speaking about opinion on that, whether it's a review or not, I might take that into account, because that can actually affect the final product. The same kind of thing just in general. So I always try to speak about the meta, but only if it affects the product. Otherwise, that's for a different video than the review of that product. I always try to focus on that. Also, I try to get what the dev actually wants. That was probably a big turning point for me as a reviewer. And just as a quick aside, I totally agree with you in that we've evolved as we're always growing as a reviewer. It is a skill set. It is very much something that takes time and practice, and you improve upon. Like, it's almost embarrassing for me to watch my early reviews, and I don't do them anyway like I do them now. Like, they are completely different. If I look at a 2018 video review from King of Average, I have one that's 10 minutes long. I couldn't do that if I tried to at this point. So we evolve as reviewers and kind of get better. And one of the things that really triggered for me, this was from Solomon Kane, was what the dev's intentions are for the game. So for instance, there was a mechanic that I didn't like because it didn't make any sense. Like, you started out with, you had to like gauge tokens, some were good, some were bad, and you started out with a set, but you could have just had it to where you had 1 and none. Like, why do you have, 3 and 2? Why are you why is it working this way? And I speak to the developers a lot in my, subsequent playthroughs, make sure I'm playing rules right, asking any questions, stuff like that, and saying, hey, why is this here? You might want to fix this. And they came back with, well, we wanted to show the internal struggle of, what this person's going through. They were like turning into a werewolf or whatever. And that's to kind of show that. So it's a mechanic that mathematically could be streamlined, but thematically is there, and they chose the thematic version of it. And so hearing, okay, they want this to be a thematic kind of role-playing experience more than some, super tight gameplay thing, and knowing that intention really helped me understand, and then on subsequent playthroughs realize, okay, this is what they're trying to give this experience or that experience. And so I think that's good too, because you could critique, oh well, hey, that mechanic could be streamlined, that math doesn't add up. But that's not the intention. And they're even aware of that and purposely chose that. I can disagree with that, but at least I understand what the dev wants. Chronicles of Drunagar, the Apocalypse box. Do you have that?
Yes.
Okay.
Just finished playing through it. Just finished.
They have this letter at the beginning where it talks about like, hey, here's our intentions, here's all that. And then after each game session, it has a developer diary, which is fantastic. And I really hope that any developers watching this pick up on that. That is so helpful for a reviewer. Like I'm in love with that style of product. That's awesome. So
I literally finished it last night. Every single chapter has we tried to expose you to X, Y, and Z. We tried to have this. It's beautiful.
Super helpful. Yeah, because otherwise I've naturally found myself trying to figure that out. It's great just to have it there. So yeah, super helpful there. Okay, I have a few more player counts. I do try to explore player counts. I don't ask what the ideal one is. I like that point, at least for the first session. Now, I'm fine. For instance, one of my favorite games, and I see these examples a lot, Star Wars Rebellion. I'm pointing to where it usually is, so apologies for that. But because I think it's a great 2-player game, and it's a terrible 4-player game. I would never suggest it to anybody if you have 4 players. I would suggest it to lots of people if they have 2. And I only know that by playing both. So I think it's very helpful to play both. But I have accidentally stumbled into a 2-player game with 4 players before. And so I do like that idea of asking. So that's definitely probably something I'll steal from you.
Yeah, that comes from years of just being as a gamer on BoardGameGeek. I always value my time. And so the BoardGameGeek has a little thing of best with, and I always check with it. And then when I started dealing with prototypes, I don't have BoardGameGeek to tell me. So I was like, you tell me, you made this game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think that's a great idea. Totally something I'll probably change. Just because also first impressions are really important. And that also goes to why I accept some prototypes over another. If it's really dinky and crappy, that is my first impression with it, and that will kind of color, at least until it proves that impression is wrong, a little bit of it, right? And so I think that's also why we kind of like the pre-production process and having that more up to snuff before a campaign, stuff like that. Okay, so I think that's really it. That's pretty much what I do. I do try to get as many. You
remind me.
Yeah,
is like the one thing I actually started adding recently that I forgot to actually mention.
Sure.
Is something I'm very much a cult of the new personality. I am excited by things. I like things. There are games that have been in my collection for years, but I also like the new and the freshness. Something I've started trying to do, I can't always do it though, just the nature of timelines, but I started trying to do it, is I try to add, like I get my 4 or 5 plays in very often. That might be in, a week-long period. I try to give myself a full week from my last play before reviewing it to kind of let the excitement of the last game settle a bit, to see where, am I still interested in playing it a week later? I can't always do it just the nature of timelines, but it's something that I found it does, we're not talking full points, but it does take away a small degree of excitement. I played it, I loved it, but also it's a week later. Do I still want to play it? Yeah, I do, but the excitement levels would drop lower. I've started trying to do that recently. It's the most recent thing I've started doing in the past 2 or 3 weeks, really.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's one of the important takeaways of you doing that is just understanding you as a person, as a reviewer, right? What affects me. And that's kind of interesting because you could go both ways on that. Because when the consumer gets it and they play it, they're going to be really jazzed about it, and then after a week not. But it on
all of these, you could, going to your point, even on player count. On player count, you could sit there and say, well, if the box didn't tell me the ideal player count, why should the reviewer be?
If they're getting it off of a shelf in a game store or whatever, they don't know.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, totally. Yeah. And then, of course, there are people that, okay, so as reviewers, we tend to not be able to stick with the game as long as some consumers are. Yeah. But I know consumers that play more board games and back more than I do as a reviewer. And so they're not sticking with the game either sometimes. And so it's okay, if the average time I play a game is, let's say 4 times on average, because some I play once, some I play 20, and it averages to whatever. Then did I get 4 solid game sessions out of that? And is that enough for there's so much that goes into it that it's always kind of interesting. One
of my favorite comments I saw recently on a board game thread about how many times reviewers play games is my favorite comment. I love this comment. The guy said, I think reviewers should play games exactly like the rest of us do, by owning them on their 6 months and not having any plays at all.
Yeah. Unwrapped. Unwrapped. Right. You can't even do the unboxing. Yeah, totally right. It's you try to emulate that, but every consumer is so different too, because there are consumers that will play a game right away and have a good game group that gets together, and getting that right amount of player count or a right amount of play sessions with the game, I think is It depends on the game, right? I do long form reviews that are very detailed and talk about specific mechanics, and I get super nervous and like I'm actually, kind of an anxious person if I don't feel like I know what I'm talking about. And if I'm going to levy a criticism to a game, I definitely want to know what I'm talking about. Now, I'm not perfect at that, but I do try to be. And part of that is getting enough game sessions in. Now, with prototypes, oftentimes you're very limited. It's like, well, it has 3 game sessions in it. So like I played all of them, but there was 3. Some games you can tell almost right away, okay, this, that, and that. And maybe you need 2 game sessions with it. And some, it's like your Assassin's Creed thing or whatever. It's like, or even Chronicles of Drunagar, if you played it 3 times, you still wouldn't have even fought in a boss, I think. Even at the very beginning for like the basic.
In the Apocalypse, the boss is the 4th mission, the full boss.
Exactly, right? And so you've never even experienced that mechanic. So I always want to try to experience all the mechanics, or at least the major ones. There are some like legacy style games that, or dungeon crawlers, every scenario has a variability and, they're doing this, they're doing that. And you're not going to play every, all 30 game sessions or whatever. I mean, your review would be a little late, I suppose.
Yes. Which is a balance. I mean, there's an inherent, it's a fascinating conversation about the concept of review drift. It's a full and accurate review, in theory, should be finishing Gloomhaven. You should, in theory. It's a balance. It's a balance that does result in some degree of incomplete content, but then again, others can now make a decision in time. It is a sacrifice. There's no perfect answer.
Yep, 100%. Yeah. It's just kind of as much as you hope is good enough to where you have a good sense of the game. And that's almost one of the skills too, is picking up on trends and stuff like that and seeing where a game would continue or where it wouldn't or whatever. When I mentioned the Wild Ascent charges and why I didn't like that. Now, obviously, I've not played every single one on that, right? But I could tell that it's in the scenario, each scenario, they kind of set up, okay, here's how you get them and here's what they do in this scenario. And it obviously changes and stuff like that. Now, maybe that's the last mission with charges and they go away and the rest of your game sessions don't have them. I don't actually know that. And you can sometimes ask and they'll sometimes know, but at the end of the day, it's also an in-development game. So reviewing prototypes and previews is kind of hard too, because things can change, right? Especially if you have a negative, right? If you have what other people might like and you're listing something and the game developer is like, well, we could probably solve that, right? Because some problems are solvable too. And so yeah, it's very interesting. Very true. Okay, I do have some other questions we'll kind of go through and talk about a lot of this actually. So the next one is just, how do you feel about mentioning other games in a review?
So it's tricky. I do so for sure to some degree. I don't think I do it a lot, but I certainly do so to some degree. The problem is there's a few different ways things are being done. There's literal comparisons of games, comparing this game to that game, which I specifically have a series called Play This Not That, when I'm specifically trying to compare 2 games. Past that, I often find it can give a lot of context. There's a game I just reviewed recently, I don't remember what it was, but I made reference, was it, I can't remember what it was, but I made reference to Kemet and how it's like grabbing a bunch of power tiles from a smorgasbord of like abilities and things. And it's helpful if you've played Kemet. If you haven't played Kemet, it's not helpful at all, which is part of the problem. It's one of those things where if you told someone how to, draw the shape for tic-tac-toe, they can either tell you a lot of words of how to do it, or they can literally say, make the number sign. It's helpful context, but again, you have to have that basis. So I think that sometimes it can be useful to abstract a lot of information down to a singular concept for those that can benefit from it. But I'm hesitant of relying on it too much, because then inherently people have to know that information, and I might not be as verbose or fully explaining myself because I'm relying on that abstraction. And then there's the comparison aspect as well. This game wasn't as good as this in that sense. I'd rather play this than that. It's something that is, I think it's relevant information to my opinion of the game and to why I might be interested or not, but it's always an inherent, it's always trouble. It's always tricky. I think there's benefits. I think there's pros and cons. I don't do so that heavily with intent or without. It's something that happens, and if it happens, it happens. That's just where my mind went as a reviewer.
Yeah. I think that's, both of us tend to just like, neither of us are scripted. Right. So, And so we might have some bullet points. We might have a plan. We might have some practice, but at the end of the day, I just played this other game maybe, and I just thought of it. And so that's my example, right? It's why my examples tend to be towards games I just recently played versus something way back when. I'm just not thinking about it. Right. It's always kind of interesting. So For me, I really try to kind of preserve that consumer experience and I guess really think about, okay, so this person that clicked on this review, ideally is trying to learn more about it to see if they will like it or not. And also, and I don't, have you been reviewing games long enough to where you reviewed the prototype and now you've reviewed the final version?
I don't think I have.
Yeah. So
I'm trying.
I've
I
only
think it
just
has
starting it, and
happened.
I've been doing this for years. So
I think well, that's a Kickstarter for you.
yeah.
I think I'm trying to remember. I'd have to look. I don't know if it's happened at all. Now that I'm thinking about it,
So it's
I'm
really
curious.
interesting.
There, yeah.
I'll definitely be
Oh no, it did.
curious.
It did. It just happened. Well, I haven't. I haven't reviewed the final version.
Okay.
Shadow Kingdoms of Valeria is the first game that I reviewed that I've since gotten the prototype. I've gotten the final version.
Perfect. Yeah. So
Yeah.
when you're going into that, and obviously it's a different space. So when I and this isn't trying to get into like nitty gritty stuff here, but like
Sure.
so I recently reviewed Wild Ascent and mentioned Storm Sunder quite heavily, right? And I did that because both are available right now, and the prototype, like the people watching my review right now, are trying to see is Wild Ascent right for me, and so I'm viewing all their other options that might be available, and then seeing, okay, well, I can compare the gameplay to these and stuff like that. Whereas the final review of that, where it's not in that if that circumstance isn't the same, I guess it's kind of like if I played a Zombicide and got a new Zombicide, but there's another Zombicide Kickstarter on right now, right? So it's just kind of interesting. Most of your views are towards the beginning, but some people could be viewing it years later. So it's kind of a balancing act, I feel, when it comes to comparing games, especially as a positive or negative, right? Because it can be very helpful up front, but I mean that's once Wild Ascents and Storm Thunder's PMs are closed, that's not useful for anybody.
Yeah.
Right.
One of my favorite things is you'll have like 50 people ask for specific comparisons. You'll do the comparison, and then you'll have like 7 people who are like, "Why would anyone compare those two games?" I'm like,
I
"It
get
wasn't
that all
even
the time.
me."
Sometimes I say that when people are like, "Hey, could you compare this to that?" And it's like, well, they're not very similar, but I mean, I guess you could. There'd be more contrast, but yeah.
It's always a balance. I mean, I think in the case of Wild and Storm, it's a great example. I think they have a lot of differences. They also have a lot of similarities. They have the similar miniatures. They have the similar world. They had a similar all-in price point to the dollar, $449. They have a lot of they share degrees of overlap in the mechanics and the narrative aspect. There are a lot of differences too. But if they were literally the same game, I mean, sometimes when you're comparing things, it's Zombicide 1 to Zombicide 2. Other times, you're literally just comparing something that has a general degree of overlap in mechanics. And it's always a judgment call. For every person who thinks it's a great comparison, there'll be people who don't. And I think it's also relevant that the target audience for those are very different. There are people who, like you and me, might be going through hundreds of games a year, and they're not looking at it as one versus the other. There are a lot of other people who are. It may not have to be that close. They only have the budget for X number of worker placements, X number of euros. A few simple mechanic overlaps can be enough for them to want that comparison so they can choose where to spend their gaming dollars.
Yeah. Or they just don't know about the other game to realize. And, you and me are saying, why would you compare those? Because we know, but they might not know. They might have just seen it and be like, oh, that looked kind of similar, but don't know how different those really are. And so sometimes the comparison of very different things is sometimes helpful too. And then, like you said, especially with target audience, like, especially if there's multiple game modes in a game, right? Like, there are people that might only be there for one or the other, or like the fact that there's all of them and stuff like that, which is, it's always so nuanced and it's hard to cover it all for sure. I do have kind of, I guess well, I had an aside question, but I forgot it, so I'll mention it later.
It comes up later. I'm still here.
No problem. Okay, so let's see here. How do you feel about full disclosures? And I guess around that, I'll go and start with me, and then you can just respond how
Sure.
you wish. So, long time ago, I accepted money for a dinky card game review. Now, this was back when I did 10-minute reviews. This is like I wasn't even monetized on YouTube at the time. So I thought, shoot, I can get $100 for all this work I've done? That's awesome. Because I'm not getting anything from any ads or anything like that. And I don't cover card reviews. So, like it's separate. It's a whole separate thing. Kickstarter ended up failing anyway, so it doesn't matter too much, in the end of things. But, then of course that company went and made a miniature game, and it's like, well, okay, now what, right? And then I was watching somebody else do a review, and They did the whole review, and then I'm like, wait a second. I go and I check my rule book, and I flip it over, and there's a special thanks to that person. And I'm like, well, they didn't mention that they're thanked in the rule book. Like, I feel like that's important just to know, And then again, you can decide. And I think I kind of started with this a little bit in a previous video, but people will trust you or they won't. And so for me, I've decided over time, as I've progressed as a reviewer, I've hopefully gotten better to just lay it all on the table and say, here's all the data. You can decide how much salt you pinch for this review or whatever. And that frees me up a little bit to not worry about, addressing it or if I even should, or, maybe I shouldn't even. It's like, well, I'll just do my review as normal and I'll list what happened and then people can make up what they want. But that's a fairly recent thing for me. Is that, how do you feel about that, especially when it comes to like email interactions and giveaways and all sorts of other touch points that we have with this industry?
Sure. So this is an area where I think you're definitely going to be better than I am. Some of it's going to be because of lack of me thinking it's important, and some of it's going to be just a lack of care. In terms of disclosures, I generally, and I say generally because, like you said, none of us are really scripted. I don't have a formula for this. If I think it's something,
verbally say it.
I think something. Correct. If I think something is relevant to the audience, I say so. That said, you and I might not think you might have a difference of opinion on what's relevant. So examples are, if I believe that I have a closer relationship with the person involved, I'll say so. Like if I'm more friendly, I don't say, hey, I'm friendly. I try to be friendly with everyone. I'm not going to list that every single time. Maybe I should say, I only email this person versus I've had a video call with them. That can add a level of bias, but I just don't think it's relevant, so I don't say it. If I'm friendly with them, I say so. If I've had a prior paid interaction with them, which is only going to be relevant for Fantasia games, I would say so. Because even though it was relevant, I did a Kickstarter walkthrough once for them. I got $200. It was great. It was helpful. But I also kind of half regret it because now I have to always say every time I review one of their games, I have a prior. But I think it's relevant. I do think it's relevant, so I'll say that.
Yep.
What else times? Recently, for a game that I got to be a character in, I said that for it. Now, this is where I might disagree with you. If they thank me in a rulebook, first of all, I'd have to know that they thanked me in the rulebook. I don't know if I think about it or care. I guess it depends on what they're thanking me for. What was my involvement for it?
Yeah.
Was it
Remind
the fact
me to
that doing the
respond to
prototype?
that. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's relevant. It's relevant. Like let's get a good example here. Might be, I know for a fact that there's at least one prototype, more than one, where I've given feedback that has been incorporated into the game. I might get a thanks in the rulebook. I don't. I mean, would I? I don't think I'd care enough. And by the way, going to your point, which I think this is the part where I said to some degree or better, if you just disclose absolutely everything, you don't think about this versus that, I think that is a safer approach. Because of the fact that I've always treated the camera as my friend. I talk to the cameras like I talk to my friend. There's a degree of being natural around that. Like I have a business on the side, BoardGameCo, a business that's going to be going away at some point, but it's something that I've never pitched my business because I don't feel natural saying, hey, by the way, please shop in my. I don't feel natural.
Yeah, exactly.
Saying that. So and again, it's a balance, a compromise. In theory, I should be saying everything. So I guess the short answer, it's too late to say short answer. The conclusion of that would be, I like to say that I tell people what I think is relevant information in terms of the disclosures aspect, but it is entirely possible that I don't think something is relevant and you might.
Yeah. When do you say that? And the reason I ask is because I always assume everybody watches all of my videos, or like the whole length of it.
I know.
And I found that a lot of times I'll mention something when I'm actually going to say part of it or whatever, right? Or just, because again, we both talk casually and we both talk, friendly to the camera and stuff like that. And so you're just kind of having a conversation, and sometimes it, oh yeah, I need to mention that. I'll mention it later, or it fits better here, something like that. And then I look at my stats and it's like, well, okay, about 11 minutes is the average. Yeah, exactly. Which means people never heard it, right? And so that's something I need to work better on, is even when I do my verbal thing, I need to start saying it sooner. And I think that's part of that's just growing as a reviewer.
Yeah, I absolutely need to, both, and also even a prototype. Something like saying, this is a prototype, it's not a finished product. If you watch my videos, I say that anywhere between the first 10 seconds, the middle, or the end.
Same. I started putting that in my full disclosure just for that. Like, this is a prototype.
I need to get in the habit.
Yeah. Because some of them look pretty darn finished, right? Especially, and so if you don't know, if you're just going into that, especially somebody who doesn't know your channel, doesn't know your, maybe doesn't even really understand Kickstarter, right? They're going to assume it's a full thing. To your point, and I agree with you in saying that, like, they might have just thanked me because, like, I'd actually have to check to see if I even am in an OCO. It was obviously before I did the full disclosure, but I played it, had some criticisms, and then they like responded and did a whole FAQ, and that FAQ is literally my email printed out pretty much. It's like my exact questions, nice. Right? And then their answers, which is great for everybody. And I'm glad it was able to improve for people, but then you might get a thing for that. You might get a thing for anything. While we are not journalists, I know I'm not, I'm assuming you're not, and we definitely don't follow that code, and journalists don't follow this code, we all know that, but there is kind of a standardization or whatever, and it talks about, I think it's actually almost the first bullet point, and I'm going to paraphrase here, but it talks about avoiding any and all even circumstances where it could be construed that you have a relationship outside or anything like that. And what that means is, even though you might have just said, hey, this would be better, and they said, oh yeah, it is, and then gave you a thanks, so it's nothing, then you know that, but others don't, right? And so that's where I think, that's why I like to just to list everything, because then it's like, well, I don't think any of this matters. Or if it would, I might not even do this video, right? If I was a developer on the game, I'm not going to review it, right? So if it's that level of closeness, and that's kind of silly, but other people might see it and think that, right? And so that's I guess my only point there.
Ultimately, no, I agree with you. And I think that's why what I'm effectively doing is I'm deciding for myself what matters to me, and I'm enforcing that onto the audience to a degree. And that's why I agree your stance is better. The question I have is how to balance that, because I think it is important to the content I produce to sound natural, and listing every single thing wouldn't be great. Oh, yeah. What you do is something that's great. You often have that little
exactly. Yeah, I just put it in there, and then I don't have to talk about it. Yep.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Putting in the description is theoretically covering your bases, but
even less people expand that, right? It's like that's less than your 11-minute view on a 30-minute video.
Yeah. The short answer is I think you're better in that case, and I need to think through how I can improve on my end, past literally just copying what you do and throwing up a little banner. Maybe I'll just do that.
Well, whatever. And if you have any thoughts after this video, whenever you can email me, because I'm honestly curious. It's something I've tried to grow as a reviewer in, and really try to do that, and it's hard, right? It's just hard. When we interact as much as we do with these companies, it's almost like the scientific thing. You can't really review it, especially a Kickstarter. Like the moment you do a Kickstarter review, like, okay, now I'm emailing them and they're agreeing to do different things and all this kind of stuff. And, and it's hard. It's always a balancing act, I think, for sure. Totally. Okay. Next one. Okay. This is a kind of a good one. I think you'll like this one. It's how do you handle bias? Or do you?
I don't.
Maybe you handle it by not.
I know.
Right? Yeah.
So it depends. The short answer is handling bias is an interesting conversation in of itself. Depending on when this video goes up, I either shortly have a video or just had a video about bias and how I address or deal with some of those aspects.
Yeah. And real quick, just for people watching, if he has posted it, I'll put it in the description.
So bias is complicated because when bias exists, how do you handle it? Like, what does you do to handle it exists? The very first form of bias that I'm going to have is going to be I just don't want to be mean to people. I want to obviously help my audience, and if I think something's a bad thing in a game, I want the audience to know that because it's something to be relevant of. I also don't want to hurt the person making the game, so I'm literally just biased towards being a decent person and not wanting to cause harm. But you cause harm either way. So how do you handle that? The short answer is for most forms of bias, I try to be as honest as possible while being as fair as possible. It means that I try to be unemotional when I don't like something. I don't sit there and say this game is crap. I don't sit there and say this mechanic is horrible. How could they ever think this? I say I did not like the fact that this aspect of the game was not fun for me. I try to be flat and dry with it, which is almost a halfway point of mitigating the amount of potential harm while also being direct with the audience. And people can argue, reasonably so, well, Alex, when you like something, you're excited, and when you don't like something, you're flat and dry. That's an unfair range. You're right. I don't want to be mean to people, but I also want to have it in my videos. So that is a mitigation point that I'm willing to accept. Perhaps I shouldn't be. Other forms of bias are going to be complicated as well. There's a whole, like in my video, I did a whole list of all different types. There's going to be bias such as getting a free copy of a game. Getting a free copy of a game, and I'm not saying it doesn't bias me, but every form of bias affects you. The question is how much can you mitigate it? I don't think it affects me that much. I'm in the fortunate position to have most of the games I want. Getting a $30 game to review is not going to be enough for me to compromise on my content. Fortunately enough, I have enough of an audience that the loss of trust that I would incur versus the $30 game is straight up not worth it. Now, granted, A $400 game might be a different conversation. That changes. Getting prototype access. This is one I have talked about on the channel. This is one where you and I might disagree on the way we handle it. Prototype access in specific is a tricky one because I can always buy a game to review. I can't buy a prototype. Prototypes are either given to you or they're not. And so I am biased towards giving good coverage if I want the next prototype.
At the same time. Yep.
Yeah. At the same time, the balance there is, again, you don't want to just say something's nice just because you want to get another copy. You'd lose the audience. That's not worth it. It's short-sighted. So to that end, the way I handle prototypes, and I've said this on my channel before and publicly, and people don't like it, and I understand why they won't, is when it comes to prototypes, I will not give prototypes, like if I think a prototype is horrific, I'll turn down the opportunity to coverage. If I think it's good to great, I will cover it. If I think I think most games are good to great. If I think it's a good game with points that I'm critical of, I will say those points. And trust me, no publisher wants to get a 3 out of 5 for me. They're not signing up for that. But I'll give it a 3 out of 5. If I think it's a 2 out of 5 or a 1 out of 5, if I think it's a bad game or straight up a game that I just don't want to play, for prototypes, I offer not to cover it. And that's a balance of the fact that since I know that for selfishly for my sake, and for my audience's sake, I want to be able to cover as many prototypes as possible, I'll turn down a review of one that I think is just not good. And the way I justify it, and it is justification to be clear, is that I think everyone enjoys a game somewhere. Most people somewhere playtested a game. Someone enjoyed it. It wasn't for me. And also, I'm one of like 2 people, maybe 3 people in the prototype space who are willing to be negative. So my personal dislike of the game matters so much more, which is almost unfair when it comes to prototypes than when it comes to reviews. So I take that with a degree of responsibility that I might be making the wrong choice when I choose not to cover something. But so regular retail reviews or final reviews, I'll cover it no matter what. Prototypes, I balance the fact that I don't want to be negative and the potential damage with the fact that I will be critical. But if I think it's a horrific game, I just won't cover it. But that's, I think, overall a general summary. It's a balance of trying to be mindful. It's a balance of being generally mindful of the fact that it will do me more harm to not be negative. I always try to have the negative points. I try to be a little drier in my negatives as opposed to emotional about it. And in the case of prototypes, I don't cover it. It's a bit of a balance, and I'm sure I make wrong choices along the way, but that's overall how I handle it.
If I could steal that last sentence and just use it in every one of my videos, I would appreciate it. I'm sure I probably was wrong somewhere, but I'm trying. I mean, at the end of the day, that's all you can do, right? I mean, you can just try to do the best you can, the best way you think you can. And then, just that it is what it is. That's what you did, right? I'm so glad that we're actually having this conversation, because one of the reasons that, again, I think it's so awesome that I get to chat with you is, we meet like aligned 100%, and then suddenly we're like this, right? And then we'll come back together and we're like this, and then it's this all part. It's like the DNA strand or something like that is constantly coming in and out, in and out. You're like, yes. Wait, what? So I love it. I think it's great. And I think it's a good conversation too, because this stuff is important. I mean, at the end of the day, like you said, like when you're like, your opinion, especially in a negative one, matters more. Like, it actually matters. It affects things, right? Whether we like it or not, at the end of the day, you're just Alex and I'm just Michael. But, if Alex didn't like that, that matters a little bit more than if Joe Blow didn't, to be honest. And so it's very hard to manage that, right? And something you got to be conscious of. One thing I'd like to add that I think, first of all, is, and I thought about this way early on when I backed Hate, because I backed Hate all in. Love it. It's a fantastic game. I spent $400+ on it. This was when I did not have a whole lot of money, especially because I was still, I was just getting into the board game hobby, which means I had other hobbies that I enjoyed that I no longer even touch because I don't have time for them or anything, or money or anything like that. Like now I'm focused on this, but at the time it was a lot that I set aside to do that. And I felt that put way more bias, that I actually paid a lot of money for it, than just getting some game for free, even if it was an equivalent value game. And I think the reason is because we all try to not feel like idiots, right? We all try to feel like, we make smart decisions. And so I made the decision to spend a lot of money on Hate. And so there's that natural kind of bias of me wanting to feel like it's a great game and I made a great purchase and I'm so smart. Not even necessarily a conscious thing, but it's just, I'm almost more cautious about something I paid for versus something I got for free, which is the flip of every comment I've ever seen about it. Everybody's always focused on like you got this for free or, whatever. And it's like, I mean, so first of all, it's rarely something I would have actually backed. You know, a lot of times for me, it's like, well, I wouldn't have paid for it anyway. So it's like, what do I care if I didn't like it or not? I don't even want it now. Like, so there's a lot of that. But just at the same point, I think I'm much more focused on, like, if I paid for it, I want to make sure that I'm being critical of it. Because I want to make sure I'm not just essentially reaffirming my own decision. Oh yeah, this is a great game and I love it. Because that's not, maybe not always the case. So there's that too. You mentioned being mean to people and not wanting to be mean to people, right? And I actually wrote a little note saying people ? And that's because, in my opinion, you're reviewing a product, not a person. And that's a very hard, fuzzy, squiggly, you know, Bigfoot photograph style, you know, you can't quite pinpoint it there, line when it comes to critiquing a product for sale by a company versus, you know, critiquing the person who made the product. Especially when you get some of these indie things that are made by like 2 people and stuff like that. And it's like, you know, like there are some times where I don't like the art. I'm like, oh, that art looks ugly, right? Well, did I just insult the artist or did I insult the art that they made that's now being sold, right? It's like,
yeah. So
I never ever think of the person. That's because, like, just like I can disagree with you and still like you as a person, Alex, I can disagree with a whole channel and still like that. I have a video titled "Come On Is Evil!" ! I do not like how they operate their company most of the times. I gave a great review. They made that. You know, it's like I can separate the product from the person. And I certainly hope that nobody thinks that I'm critiquing a person. I think that's quite rude. But it is kind of hard. And I think people have different opinions on that, right? I think a lot of people, and from the creator aspect, because people critique my videos. I don't know if they critique yours like they do mine, but some people are like, hey,
someone's always critiquing.
Yeah, right. And it's like, I'm not even selling this. You paid nothing for this. You chose to click it. Like, I'm not even peddling my videos to you. I don't even pay for like ad space or anything. So it's like,
my favorite comment is, dude, this, and this, or this video isn't worth my time. I'm like, worth what to you? You didn't pay for it.
Not only did you not pay for it, but you chose to click it. Like, it's like, and hopefully it didn't trick you into it. So anyway, yeah, it's hard to separate yourself from your creation, but it is something where I have to realize that even people who didn't pay for it, they didn't do that, they're not, you know, attacking me as a person. They're attacking my video or my, you know, it's not always me. Sometimes it is. I mean, sometimes people will critique me too as a person, but that's maybe just a line crosser. But
the short flip side is, and by the way, your stance is, I would argue, better. The way you look at it is better. For the sake of, you're a reviewer, you're reviewing games, you should abstract the two. I also know very often I've dealt directly with the person who designed the game. I know I've covered games where literally the person said, this has to fund or this company is done. That's it. Yeah. I mean, I'm combining those two. It's not cool that I'm combining those two. I'm trying to review something, but I am combining those two. Doesn't mean I'm going to tell my audience something is good if it's not. No, it doesn't mean that sometimes I'm willing to back out of something entirely. Yeah. It's not ideal.
Yeah,
I should
and that's a question I have for you later on. So we'll definitely cover negative reviews and stuff like that for sure. But I was like, that separation between product and, you know, being sold and paid for with cash, and then actually, you know, like the people doing it. It's very hard to kind of do that. The other thing I think is the only other thing I'm going to add to this actually is just a focus. I have a huge focus on viewers versus company. And what I mean by that is I don't make a video for a company. I make a video for my viewers. And so if I had a bad experience, I think like, hey, this game's something I don't think you guys would like. And this will go slightly to bias, right? Since you and I are fairly open about our bias, people know what I tend to like and not like. And they can decide if they align with that typically or not. So if I say something like, I didn't like this, but I thought I would, in other words, if this looks like the kind of game I would like, and I didn't, then a lot of my viewers would also think, hey, I'm kind of interested in this. And then if they find out, well, I kind of like the same game he likes, and he said, actually, it looked good, but it wasn't, or this wasn't the best for me or anything like that, that helps my viewers. And if I helped one person just make a good decision for them, then I'm happy. And I'm not even like thinking about the company or their financials or their circumstance or like, and that might be a fault to me because I don't think about it at all. Like literally, when I posted my Wild of Sin thing and they were like, well, it's like 2 days out, before I was like, I didn't even think about that. And then I start to feel kind of bad. I'm like, oh, that's kind of a crappy situation. I was just trying to get my video out before it ended because I wanted people to see my opinion and then view that and kind of take that. And I didn't even think about impact or circumstance on them at all. For better or worse.
For better or worse. Unfortunately, I think that as a reviewer, it is better to be emotionally disconnected from those things or to not be aware of them. Because as a reviewer, our goal is to review the product. The fact that I might tie those two together is a reality that it is what it is, and I'm going to make decisions around that reality. But in terms of the viewer getting the best and most honest, most direct experience, not conflating those two is the best way to go.
Yes and no. I think I'm too extreme in that sense, and I guess I'll tell you why. So while I think it is a fantastic thing to be able to do that in my head and separate the two, and not even getting to the fact that not everybody can do that, and that is what it is, but for the people who did want the product, if you're aware of something like, hey, we're not going to be able to deliver this game at all if you make a bad review, essentially there are like if you're not aware of the impact you can do on something, that's hurting consumers too. If you know what I'm saying, like you need at least some level of awareness of when I say this could happen, because that makes you more careful and this is something I need to work with, I think. And how you say something or in what you say, because just like how we started out, right? Like what Alex thinks matters a little bit more than what somebody who doesn't have thousands of people tuning into them. And you kind of have to be aware of the weight of your words, I guess.
When I first had like 100 subscribers, I did say like I always had a series I still continue of games leaving my collection, and there were times where I was like, I never want to play this game again, just casually with no context to it.
Yeah, you're just talking to a friend.
I'll still say the same thing, but now I'll say why you might. I was like, this was a good game. It's a pretty lightweight, pretty this, pretty that. For myself, I never want to play it again because of this, this, and this. I try to just add more nuance. I'm still going to give my opinion, but I can't be as casual with the words.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree. And that there's kind of a flip side to that, but I'll mention that in the negative one as well. So there's actually one more question before we get to that anyway. So the next one is, you rate with numbers. I hate numbers. So could you explain why you decided to start adding numbers to your reviews?
Yes.
What's the benefit
It's a very quick and simple answer. I mean, nothing's quick and simple. The why I did is quick and simple. The why I did is because back when I rated without numbers, I would have people who would ask me, did you like this more than that? And like the common example I give is Endless Winter versus Shogun no Katana. Both Kickstarters, both Euros. And Endless Winter is one of my favorite games. It was my favorite Kickstarter of 2020. It was one of my favorite games of 2020. I mean, not 2020, but whatever it is, prototype. And Shogun no Katana was a game that I enjoyed. And I think, perhaps incorrectly, that I correctly show you my level of enthusiasm when I'm talking about what I liked and didn't like and all that. But if someone can ask me that question, maybe I'm not. Maybe the fact that I liked Shogun no Katana and I loved Endless Winter, maybe that wasn't evident to you. And I literally started adding numbers just because I'd get questions like that. I'd get questions, but this or that. So it's like, hey, if my opinion, if what I liked, didn't like, and Ciela's not liking, if that didn't give you the full picture you need of where I am, a general number system might do that. And so I started using my own. I started actually, when I first started rating with numbers, I shifted away from my own personal rating scale. I always had a little board on my own rating scale where I used the 1 to 5 scale. And I shifted away to trying to do a 1 through 10 scale, like it's more standard. I found that it didn't really work with me. My biggest problem with the 1 to 10 scale is most of the time 1 to 5 aren't even used, so it's not really a 1 to 10 scale. So I shifted back to my personal scale. I have complaints. It's a source of constant angst as to what should I do, how should I rate it, should I use the points, should I not use the points? It's something I will always be tweaking and always be mindful of. But I started adding it for those who aren't basically taking away. Okay, great. So what does Alex think? At the end of the day, what is this? If they want that comparative scale between Alex and Alex, now they have something. That's why I started adding them.
Yeah, so you spoke of a really cool thing, or at least a really interesting thing that I've talked about for way too long in my Discord, like several times. In fact, I'm sure there are some long-term patrons that roll their eyes when I start talking about it again. So they're like, oh gosh, just copy-paste what you did the last time. You've mentioned just recently, most games are pretty great. I would agree, actually, for whatever target audience they have, right? Obviously, like, Agricola is not a great game, according to me. I've never played it, have no desire to, right? I'm just proud I know how to say the word. So I agree. And that's what gets it kind of hard, right? Like, if I said I love Hate, okay, it's a 10. I love Star Wars Rebellion, okay, so it's a 10. Well, one of my favorite games is Conan. Really enjoy Conan. Love the river system, love the gym system, IP, I really dig, it's cool, all that kind of stuff. My wife really likes it too, so the people I'm playing with really enjoy it. We play that so freaking much, I don't want to look at it for a while. Until the next Kickstarter delivers, I don't want to see Conan. Okay. I don't, I took it off no, that's not why I took it off my shelf. But, like, seriously, like, so what... Yes, it was great, but I've overplayed it now. I don't want to play that again. It doesn't sound appealing. It doesn't sound great. So maybe that changes a little bit. Or if I have that 10, if that's a 10, so if Hate, Conan, and Star Wars Rebellion is 10, why would I ever pick out an 8? Why would I ever choose to not play the 10? If it's better, why would I pick, this game that's an 8 out of 10? Well, because in certain circumstances, it's a 10 out of 10. If I'm tired of the 10 out of 10, maybe that one's now my new 10 out of 10. I have a real big hankering for a campaign game, or I have a real big, desire to do a dungeon crawl right now. And so that like, it doesn't make sense to me to ever pick something lower. Like, why would you not do the best? But I don't play all 10. They're not all 10 out of 10s, obviously. But at times they are, because at times they went out of all my collection to get to the table. And so I guess that's one struggle I have with it. Like, in my mind and how I weigh, it's like, why would I ever pick anything less than a 10 out of 10?
I agree with you on so many. Again, I said this is a source of constant angst because I'm constantly trying to evaluate it. One of the more recent struggles I had is I gave Core Quest at one point a 5 out of 5. I was like, this is incredible, and I was rating it a 5 out of 5 as a kids game to play with my kids. I thought it was great as a kids game to play with my kids. Is it a 5 out of 5 for me? No. But then I was like, later, I wouldn't give it a 5 out of 5 now, because like later I'm like, okay, so how do I rate something that's the best at what it's trying to do, but my own personal excitement isn't there?
Yes, exactly.
Like, it's going to be a constant source of angst as to how I do it, what I do. I don't have easy answers.
Exactly. Is Star Wars Rebellion a 10 out of 10? Well, a 2-player maybe, but a 4-player no. Like how can it be a 10 out of 10? But in certain circumstances, it's a 3 out of 10. I don't know. So that's something I've always struggled with myself. And I guess the only other thing is when you. So you give Wild Ascent a 5 out of 5, and then you gave Levon Rising 5+ out of 5. Tongue in cheek, I know, and I'm not trying to dig on that, because I think that's honestly kind of stupid. Not what you said, the discussion around it.
Sure.
The issue I saw and what I've seen lately is the last few things you've done with the numbers, and this is what I see when I look at video game reviews and stuff like that too, is people focus on the numbers so much to where they'll just scroll to the end to see what you gave it. And I worry that like the whole discussion, it wasn't about the pros you gave Wallace, and it was about the cons. It was nothing nuanced like that. It was, he gave this a 5 and he gave this a 5, so that means that they're he's not. They take all the wonderful review that you took, and it's not even discussed. It's all the number. I think we naturally as humans kind of focus on it. And I worry it almost takes away from that, because then, no, don't focus on the 5. Focus on what I said. Don't focus on the 5+. Focus on the thing I said before that in the quote, right? Like, that's the important part.
So you're definitely not wrong. I say this to somebody who has scrolled to the end of Foursquares to check what they all gave it. Uh-huh. You're definitely not wrong. I would say most of the time I watch a review, sometimes I just want to know the final end.
I worry about that with my pros and cons list, because I put it at the end.
I've done that too. I've clicked to the end of your pros and cons list too. So do you see you're part of the problem?
Exactly. That's my number, right? That's just summarize.
It depends. I think it does. Like, there are times both with Foursquares and with your reviews, there are times where I watch the whole thing. I'd argue most of the time I watch the whole thing if I'm interested. Sometimes I'm just busy. Sometimes I know that, like, okay, great, I really want to know what KoA thought of X, Y, and Z, but also I don't know if I'll actually finish this right now, and if I forget, then I won't come back to it. So what I'll do is I'll go to your pros and cons list, I'll read it, and then I'll reset and start watching, and I may not finish the video. And I've done that with Foursquares.
It might pique your interest, it might not. Oh, why did you give it a 5? Why did you? Yeah, totally agreed. And that's, I think we're on the same page here, right? It's just you decided to implement it and I didn't, but it's like I said, the pros and cons is kind of the same thing. It's hard to, we make fairly detailed, and we put a lot of work into these reviews, and it's frustrating when you just see people, to me it was frustrating to me, because I know you did a whole review on Levon Rising, and all I saw was the numbers, and it's like, don't care about the number. How did you feel about it, right? Is it good? Is it bad? You know, and again, if I label Star Wars Rebellion a 5 out of 5, and then somebody sees it and says, okay, great, and then plays it with 4 players, they have done themselves a disservice.
and you're really not wrong. Like for that 5 out of 5 point, like going to that, like in my review of Wild Ascent, I gave them one of the first things. I spent a good portion of time saying you will have to be comfortable making house rules left, right, and center until you figure out what's going on, because the rules are bad.
Yeah.
And then the problem is someone will see that and be like, Alex gave it a 5 out of 5. He's bought and paid for and biased. I'm like, no, a bad rule book for me and what I care about. One of my favorite things about your videos, one of my favorite things is, here's my pros and cons, here's my disclaimers. And remember, not all negatives are created equal.
Yep.
You know, flimsy card stock does not equal a bad game experience.
Exactly.
That's just a true statement. Exactly. And for me, my bias is a bad rule book. It will almost always, it might stop me from getting to the game, but once I get past the bad rule book, I don't care. I'll note it because I think it's important that you should know about it, but I already know how to play now, and now I have a good game here. So do I care about that? But there are other things that people might care about. And so you're right. The focusing on the 5, focusing on a number by itself can certainly have a negative impact.
Yeah, totally.
Not having a number.
Fun fact, the reason I added that little blurb is because people were counting how many pros versus how many cons I had, like they were somehow equal. Right?
And it's not.
No, it's not. If I list flimsy player boards and, the setup takes a long time, and then I have most amazing game I ever played and is a great investment and is fantastically, well crafted. Those are not equal. Yes, they're both 2, but so yeah, totally agreed there. One interesting fact, and this is I guess an aside real quick, is when I reviewed Bloodborne, I really enjoy playing Bloodborne now that I house ruled it, but I did not review it with that house rule. And I guess I'm just curious how you feel about that. This isn't even like a whole big topic question. It's just like, do you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, I do. So I have a game. This might be a spoiler to things that are happening on the channel. Terraforming Mars: Ares Expedition is a game that I liked it. I thought it was a good game. It was very far removed from Terraforming Mars to me, and before I got rid of it, in fact, I literally reviewed it. I gave it a 3 out of 5, focusing on the numbers. I then put it in a games leaving my collection video, and then I kind of had one of my people in a game group who loves Terraforming Mars. I got one last play with them before I was getting rid of it. I was like, I'll just show it to you just so you know what it's like. And while playing, we had a few ideas, and we've made a few adjustments. And I will be putting out a video again later talking about why I'm keeping Terraforming Mars with the adjustments. My overall opinion there, I think, is, and I don't know what's going up. It's going to go up at some point. But my overall opinion there is, I think that a game should be reviewed without the adjustments. A game should be reviewed. Most people are not going to play it with house rules. If you know the house rules at the time, by all means mention it. By all means say, by the way, I had a better time once I implemented this. If you know about it later, what to do, if it's a big enough deal, another video, it's always good. It's good for views. Hey, KoA, like Bloodborne Returns or whatever it is. It's good for views, and it's good for informative content. It's not pure clickbait. It's if somebody else who like for instance, they say this about Dark Souls a lot. Dark Souls, which I've never played, a lot of people say it's a it's a mediocre at best game. But if you house rule X, Y, and Z, lots of people seem to like it. I think it's relevant content as long as people know what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think we're pretty much aligned there, because that's exactly how I handled with the Bloodborne, because I already knew about it, and I mentioned, hey, I'm not like this pros and cons list is for the game they sold, right? Now, I personally like it more with this, and I even said what that is. That's because, again, I wanted my video to be helpful to viewers, so that if they hear that and like, oh, I could play like that, yeah, that's fine, then they can go to the friendly local gaming store and go buy it. And that review was helpful to them if they knew that ahead of time. Especially because sometimes stuff is just easily fixed, too. Like, sometimes you'll see a mechanic that, like, you don't like, and it's like, that's kind of dumb, but you can just do this.
Either Fields, the dream sequence, tons of reviewers hate it, and they made changes.
Exactly. Or the encampment phase. So I dogged on the encampment phase in Wallace, and I didn't like it. Somebody mentioned, you could just use tokens or whatever. And then I was looking at it, I was like, I guess I probably should have. I didn't, right? And it's kind of the thing, like, if you think about it, if you know about it during the review, you can mention it, but sometimes you don't mention it. But if I had known that, I would have mentioned that, right? Like, you could just.
But it doesn't invalidate your point. Your point was with the given rules. I did the same thing. I had it set up on my table. I literally grabbed, I just had a bag full of dice, and I grabbed 5 dice and just put them in piles of 4. And then I would just slowly take piles from the dice. Then I saw after someone said, they just rotate the dice downwards. I was like, I was literally using dice. I could have done that.
Yeah. But we're like, I was so close. Yeah.
Yeah. but it's so I didn't critique that as a negative. I had other issues with the camera face, but that part didn't bother me because I just didn't. I already came up with a solution and I moved forward. But the flip side is the same way you might think. You might be thinking, well, I didn't think of that, and so I should have. So the flip side is I might not give it a negative, and somebody else is struggling with it and being like, oh, that BoardGameCo guy is not giving it a negative. It should be a negative. It just I moved past it. Something else actually, just a complete tangent. Going back to earlier in the video, I mentioned sometimes I play a game on TTS. I know the designer, and I know specifically you don't specifically, so you can have the full experience. And your review of Monster Hunter, I remember watching that and thinking to myself, "Wow, I completely missed something." There was a rulebook aspect that was missing from the rulebook that didn't bother me at all because I played it first and I knew how to play it. And you gave a negative that I should have had, could have had, and didn't because I played online with the developers. We're always gonna have blind spots. Like you said at the beginning, I think a core point that will always be true is ultimately our audiences either learn to trust us and align with us or they don't, and that's what makes us the content creator they watch.
And understand we're not perfect.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
We're just trying the best we can, and sometimes we miss it. And sometimes, like, I don't know about you, but I feel like I think I just didn't do well on that. Whether it's an opinion piece, whether it's a review, whatever. Sometimes you're just like, I could have done that so much better. And I mean, there's nothing really to do about it except hopefully learn from it and do better the next time. But and hope that viewers understand, like, you're trying, right? You're doing the best you can. And that goes to show that, again, like that circumstance is there. Because I've also played games on TTS. I played Bart Sung with them. Now I didn't review it. I didn't have a prototype or anything. But I mean, there's things where sometimes you don't get a choice in how you play it, even, right? I mean, especially with prototypes and stuff like that. So yeah, we just do what we can, of course, and hopefully we get it all. Okay, so I guess the big one before I open it up to you. Ooh. Have you had a negative review, and how did you feel about posting it? We've kind of alluded to this, I think, throughout the whole video, off and on.
Sure. So my rating system, that's something I plan on going to at some point. Speaking of numbers, I plan on opening up I have a little private board. I've been cleaning it up, just making sure it's all, because it was a mess, but I've been cleaning it up, putting reviews of my dates and all these things, whatever. And I plan on opening it up shortly. But my most common rating is going to be a 3. That's the most common rating I give. Ones are straight up bad games. I think I only have, since being a content creator, I think I've only had 2 ones. Neither one of them turned into a video. Both of them I said, I really do not think I should cover this. I will.
Yeah, should clarify. In a video, have you ever been like, this is obviously I do not like this game?
Yeah, the video in a second we'll get to. By the way, both those ones are Kickstarters that did not fund, unfortunately.
It tends to happen, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's yeah. Then the twos are going to be my equivalent of a negative review that I've had to put up, and that is going to range a bit. I think one of my 2s was for Kickstarter. I said, hey, I really had way too many issues with this. I think it's a core system that's good. I just had way too many issues past the core system, and they said they still want their video, so I put it up. But I asked them first. My 2s. This goes back to something I said earlier in the video. My 2s for retail games, I just put up. I'm less concerned with the damage I have because I think I'm one voice amongst many, as opposed to on Kickstarter. I think this, again, like I said, I think there's like 2 or 3 people who are reviewing prototypes. Most people are previewing prototypes. And so I think that means my voice has more power and I'm more concerned with it. There's not a lot of them. There's a handful of 2s out there. And again, they will all be on my ratings board. But I've done it. I don't like doing it. I genuinely don't. But the flip side is, it's always a balance between the fact that I do feel a responsibility or a connection with the person I'm playing with, working with, versus I do feel responsibility towards the audience as well. As long as I believe I have enough positive things to say that this is a game that's right for somebody, I usually just try to cover everything as flatly as possible and then have my opinion at the end of, this wasn't a game for me because X, Y, and Z. I have a review coming up either, again, I don't know, before or after, which is another game. Like, I think it's a good game. I think they spent so much time making the game good, they forgot to make it fun. It's intricate. It's detailed. It has pathways to victory. It has tons of nuance and strategy and depth. And not a single thing I did in the game was fun. It was all whatever. Those types of games, I think there's an audience for them. I think
people
Euro
like games. I get it.
I like other Euros. I didn't like this one. But so yeah, I don't love. I remember shortly after starting to get really have a channel, there was a particular instance where I played a game online and I really didn't enjoy it, and it was the first time I had a really gut check of, do I actually want to do this? Do I actually want to be on video, on camera doing this? I don't want to be a straight up shill saying, I shouldn't say that. I don't want to straight up be someone who does always positive content. It's not genuine to me. But at the same time, I don't want to sit there and put a negative review out. Over time, I have become a little more desensitized to it. I think it's a good balance. I think I want to be a little desensitized. I don't want to be too desensitized. But yeah, so I've had to do negative reviews. I've had to put up the videos, and I try to be as balanced as possible.
So you feel pretty good when you post that, when you post it too? Like you feel good that you did a good job and that you're fine with it?
Oh no, I hate every single video that's a 2 I hate. I really don't like, I put them up. I don't like doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I'm pretty close. I think I'm a little bit more stronger in not liking posting them. But I'm also probably a little bit stronger in my twos and how they come across because I don't go kind of flat in the negative and stuff like that. Yeah, so it's always difficult because, like I said, there's a natural kind of filtration before a game actually gets to my table, before it's shipped to me, and that's that I obviously think I'll like it or that I'm interested in it and I want to see if I like it. Because, at the end of the day, again, I don't think you or I are both trying to review every game out there or every Kickstarter out there or anything like that, right? So you're not going, oh, well, even though this doesn't look appealing to me at all, I'm going to review it. Like, I don't know. I've never said yes to that. I've found myself almost wanting to if people are asking for it, right? That's the hard part, is when people are like, oh, can you tell me that? I was like, oh, it's kind of like, when I made my ISS Vanguard looks boring video, right? Mm-hmm. Like, everybody that was posting on it likes it, which is, I think, kind of general, right? And people kept asking me, like, hey, what do you think? I was like, it looks kind of blah, but it's like, but I wasn't gonna like make a whole shebang out of that. And so then I'm like, okay, well, I'll go in and post mine. There's enough other people saying how amazing and great it is and that they love it, and I'm very glad that they enjoy it. It looks like it's not my game, right? It's a crinkle in space. I can't. And so,
speaking of pits in my stomach, I remember I don't think I watched the original on-table coverage of the game, and so I just said, ISS Vanguard and Awakening Realms prototype, please. I'm such a huge fan. Sign me up. Mm-hmm. And then I got the game and I read the rules and I read the ship phase and I had this massive pit in my stomach. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to cover this. This looks horrible. And I enjoyed it, which was great. I thought it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, right.
It felt like a Mass Effect. But I literally, it's one of those times I had a pit in my stomach. I was like, how in the world the first Awakening Realms games I cover is going to be this boring fest of just going through a ship book? This is homework. It's not ISS Vanguard, the Office game. I don't disagree with your perception. I just it took me getting the prototype before I got to that point, and then I played it and I liked it.
Well, that's the other hard part, right? Is maybe I'd like it and maybe I'd love it too, and I just didn't know, right? I mean, at the end of the day, as a consumer, as somebody who wouldn't get it for free from Awakened Realms, I'd have to buy ISS Vanguard. Well, that's a chance I'm not willing to take, right? To me, it looks boring. I'm not going to do that, which also means I don't get the opportunity to even prove otherwise. But I'm too busy to check each game to see if my assumptions are correct too, right? But it sucks posting them. Like, I don't like it. And I think part of the thing for me is, first of all, wrapping my head around the fact that I can say something and it actually mean thousands of dollars worth of something. Now, I don't, people on Discord know, I'm a very self-deprecating person. I'm actually very much not, I do not, I wish I had more of an ego, actually. But I'm also aware that what I say does matter, right? I don't think I'm changing the world with my voice or anything like that. And I think Kickstarters are already a niche, and then the ones I cover are a niche, and then my effect on those is a niche too. But at the same time, it does matter. And so it's like, okay, so what I do affects things, and I didn't like this, and I want to be able to share that so that people know, hey, I didn't like this, so if you align with me, maybe you won't either, and stuff like that. And then in previews especially, I try to be more suggestive, right? Because they can fix things, right? So it's like, this is a negative, but it's not like it's a weird balancing act, right? It's a weird intention. Obviously, I think hard critique should come for improvement or information, not just to be mean, right? And that's a problem. So I always call it softball criticism. Is my term I always call it, and it's I actually point to your ISS Vanguard thing.
I watched.
Okay. Did I say it?
Yep.
Okay. So you already know.
Said, I thought it was great.
And I don't think it's a
gameplay, and Jesse said it's light gameplay.
Yes.
But
yeah. And it's not like, oh no, that's terrible, right? Because he viewed it as light, and you said weak, and you're like, oh, okay, no, I think I meant white, right? But that difference is a nice thing to look at, because like, well, weak means that it should have been something more that didn't meet expectations, whereas light is saying the same thing, but it's not assuming that expectations were met. And
I would say for
even
myself,
what you say, like murder versus, kill, right? Do you murder the animals or do you kill the animals? Like the inflections and your tone, it's really hard. So when you do these hard criticisms, and I tend to, again, talk like I'm talking to friends, which means I say stupid, I say crap, I say this stuff is dumb, right? Like it's just kind of how I speak as a person. But I hate posting them. I really do. I don't like it. Like
For myself, going back to that point of what I do with it, it's the more I like a game, the more I'm willing to be direct about like, oh, this game was so much fun, but the rulebook was garbage. I'll say that. Versus when I didn't like the game, I
and the
usually
rulebook's garbage
towards softball.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I said. That's why I'll usually go down towards softball. I'll be like, yeah, this, and the rulebook wasn't great too. Meaning, if I don't like the experience, I'm usually more mindful of the damage, and I still feel an obligation to cover things, so I will say things with a little softball. Versus when I like something, I have no problem being like, hey, this was a great experience in X, Y, and Z, but this part was terrible, and they really need to fix that.
Yeah.
So it's a balance. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard. Like I think at the end of the day, if what I do, this is why I end up posting it. By the way, like even though I don't like it, it's not fun. I don't like I would much rather get clicks about people, seeing that, oh hey, I changed my mind and I love ISS Vanguard. I would have much rather have had those clicks than the one, like it, because then you get comments and you get. I mean, it's not a fun experience as a content creator to be negative on something because instantly some people aren't happy with you, right? And it's just no fun.
Yeah.
Plus the effects and everything like that. In my opinion. Let's say, and this is just an example. So let's say I posted my Wild Ascent video, and somebody saw that and said, "Oh, you know what? That doesn't sound good. And I agree with the points that you made, and so I'm going to cancel my pledge." I would rather them cancel it than back it, get the game. They say, "Oh yeah, no, that AI did bother me. Oh, this did bother me." Put it up for sale and talk bad about it to their friends right afterwards, and you'll see on the Board Game Geek marketplace on eBay suddenly it's up everywhere a month after delivery. And played it once, didn't like it. Like to me, I feel like I'm benefiting the company slightly in the fact that everybody there wants to be there. Everybody there is happy about the game and is excited about the game and isn't going to then suddenly dog on it afterwards and stuff like that. Or at least. You want happy backers, not just backers, right? And so as long as your game aligns with the person and that's good, then I think that's good. So that's why I end up hosting it, because I think it's good for the consumers, because then they didn't waste their time. If it's not good for them, it's not good for them. And in the end, I think it's good for the company. Now, you mentioned a time where it's like, if this doesn't fund, we're like dead. It's like, well, that's no good either, right? But
I'm saying I would still take the same stance. For better or for worse, if I didn't like that game, I wouldn't cover it. But if I liked the game and I had critiques, I'm going to say it. I'm going to say the critiques. It's always a balance. There are no perfect answers. Mm-hmm. Anything you do. If
you weren't going to cover it, do you mean you wouldn't do a review, or you wouldn't mention it in an opinion video? I'm asking because of The Witcher.
I wouldn't review.
Because we chatted about that.
What do you mean? What are we in The Witcher?
Where we got the offer for the prototype, and it's like, hey, but we asked, like, if you don't like the game, don't waste your time with the review. Right?
Oh no. So yeah. So if the way the way I put it is, if I think my opinion is that bad, I will just not review it. I will not cover it. I will say, if somebody asks me about it, I will say I played it. I'm not going to lie to my audience.
You wouldn't put it on like your Kickstarter videos or anything?
What do you mean by putting on my Kickstarters? I mean, I'll talk about the game.
Yeah.
So I'll
when you're talking about outside of a review and you're just giving your opinion on the campaign and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'll loosely talk about it. I'll say I had the opportunity to play this, something like that. I'll talk about that, because again, it's the last thing you ever want to do is ever lie to your audience. All you need is one lie, and all faith and trust is gone, and it should be. So I will never lie to my audience, but I'm not interested in shining a spotlight on something either. So that's the that's the balance. So and again, it's something I've only had to do. I have to think it through, maybe 2 or 3 times. One of the things that's interesting is this board of my reviews that I'm opening up. Those 2s or 1s are on that board. I'm not scrubbing my board from my content. There's just something that I didn't play and I didn't cover it. It's still going to be a 2. It's still going to be 1 on the board. But again, they're exceptions. They're minorities, but they do happen. Mm-hmm. And if I think my review of a game and my opinion of a game and not liking a game is going to tank the company, for better or for worse, I just not interested in covering that. And it might be the wrong move. And it might mean that my audience says, oh, this BoardGameCo guy, he's going to hold back a negative thing. Sometimes, yes. I don't want the responsibility.
yeah. And I think that's probably our key difference there. And that's I think probably where we diverge the most is just kind of that stance there, right? That I don't want to hurt the company and me. I want to help my my viewers. And if my viewers were wondering what I thought about The Witcher, I'm going to tell them what I thought about The Witcher. And if I hated it, then I hated it.
And like I said, I think your stance is more correct. As a reviewer, I think your stance. No, I'm saying it depends what you're trying to do.
Yes, yeah, that's what I was going to say. That was my is like, well, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish with your channel for your viewers, for what you want to contribute to the industry and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So it's not, and I think that's the most important part. If I and I think people, especially viewers, need to learn this, that if I say I do this because I don't think this, that doesn't mean that other people can't think that, and that's fine. Like, it doesn't invalidate them just because I disagree, right? Or just because I do something different or something like that. It doesn't necessarily mean that at all, right? There are, like, I speak bad about taking, like, I would think it's terrible to get paid for a review, but there are people that do paid reviews all the time. There are whole channels that make it, well, no, hey, I was paid for this review, and then review it. And if that's what they want to provide, that's totally fine. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, you do what you want with the channel to do what you want with the channel, and the viewers that watch you will watch, like this whole, because I don't know about you, but I get compared to other reviewers a lot. And maybe it's because I'm honorary on screen. I don't know. Do you get this a lot? I get compared all the time.
Everyone compares to everyone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I get compared to you. I get compared to Quack and Tom and Z and Rado and everybody, right? Like it's like, well, they're doing what they're doing and I'm doing what I'm doing, and that's okay. That's, it's not necessarily a bad thing. And so I would caution against saying necessarily that's a better take on a review, because I think it's a different take on a review. I would actually correct you on that. I don't think how I review it is better than how you review it. I think the reviews just maybe serve different purposes or have a different focus. Like I said, I'm hyper focused on helping the person try and decide click back or not back, right? And you do that with very much on price point, and I'm really anti against that. Yep. Right, like I yell all the time. I just go like, "Oh my gosh!" Like, this is a game, not a business decision. Because when I back a game, I never think of selling it. If I'm thinking of selling it, I'm not backing it. Like, I want this game to be forever. And you're like, well, this gives you, this, and this gives you that. And for people who want that, they can get that. I think that's awesome. I think that's fine.
Yeah, for me, the amount I rotate my collection, it's so fascinating. It's like I want to back everything. So like Bard Song is a great example of this. Bard Song is a game that I was leaning towards. No, even after playing it, I was like, it's good, but I don't know if I love it. But I was like, but I can sell it if I don't like it. So sure, let's get it. And a lot of people think that. I don't. Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh my gosh, people shouldn't pay for a product just to sell it later, but it is what it is, and some people work that way, some people's brains work that way, some people don't, and that's, I think, fine. So I would correct you on that. I don't think that makes me a better reviewer or anything like that, or even that's a better stance. I think it's a good one, that's why I do it, but that's fine too. Okay,
no, we all have different. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, I was just gonna echo what you're saying. Okay. We all have different stances and approaches of the way we handle things, and ultimately, like going back to a point we've said again and again, we'll continue to say in other videos, the audience decides who's providing value to them.
Sure. And in fact, I think it's great that everybody's doing something a little bit different too, right? Mm-hmm. Like if we're all doing the same thing, and it just, I don't know, there's less value there, right? Industry needs breadth. It's why I'm so glad that I see so many other channels like yours start covering this stuff, Like, I just started from an angry person that was like, I'm interested in the gameplay and hate, and everybody's talking about the theme. And I was like, right, so I did that hate detail. That's what started this whole thing, was just, there's a game involved there too. Have you thought about talking about that? But the more people covering Kickstarters, the more people looking at these games and reviewing them, giving it this, consumers benefit from it, 100%. Do you have any closing thoughts or questions you have for me?
No, you covered this topic much more in depth than I thought we were going to. This was
well, I told you, like we both kind of talk,
I know, but I'm trying to think of anything else. I'll have to think of a follow-up, stuff that I want to do with you here. So I'll have something, I'll have you on my channel at some point.
Sure.
But
I'd love to.
This was really good. Anything we covered negative reviews, we covered bias, we covered, what your review process is, player count, time spent. This is pretty in depth.
You haven't thought what my favorite color is, or you have no questions for me?
I don't know if your favorite color impacts the game.
Apple red.
I don't know if it does. Apple red, nice. Yeah. I'm like a solid teal turquoise-ish myself personally.
Ooh, cool.
But yeah.
I think that's more
very good.
Like dark red.
Past that, my main takeaway from everything is I really have to play Hate. I've heard you talk about it enough. I have it on the shelf behind me and have not played it.
You do. So, and it's campaign based mostly. So That's again the problem. That's the hard part of getting to the table, right? Maybe a different discussion. Maybe I shouldn't have even said that, but I have the same issue. I love it, but it's hard. You can't just do a one-off with it. So it's an
I'm
investment.
working on getting a dedicated table for campaign games. I don't know if it'll happen, but I'm trying to find the space in my house of where to put it just for the campaign game.
Yeah.
So I can go to the campaign game and go back to the review on the other game. Go to the campaign game and back and forth.
I like it. And just keep it up there. Perfect. Okay, well, thanks so much for actually being willing to come on here and chat with me. I know I can be viewed sometimes as a little bit of unknown in that, so I'm glad you felt confident in coming in here and chatting. And I get that viewers will appreciate this discussion and maybe learn something from it. I enjoyed talking to you just as another creator, as another reviewer, as somebody else trying to do this and just do it the way they see fit. It was awesome, and I learned a few things, so I'll definitely be asking player counts in the future. I think I definitely benefited from this as a person. It's just good to chat with you.
This is genuinely insightful, and you set the bar for like what I'm gonna have to come up with when I do another video with you.
Oh sure, yeah. As long as it's not about colors, we've already colored that. I think you're good.
Yeah,
I'm sure. I'm sure it'll be. Okay, well, again, thank you so much. And again, for everybody watching, there are links down below to most everything we pretty much just mentioned. So check out BoardGameCo. Alex is a cool guy, and he covers a lot of the same stuff I do, plus more. So if you're ever interested in something, especially if I'm not covering it, definitely recommend him. I think he probably will have a video or 3 on them. So definitely worthwhile there. And again, thank you, Alex. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much. This was a blast.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks.